Hello, I'm Victor Vogel. From I'm the author of Creating Bad Guy Free Zone, and I wanted to take a couple minutes on this particular video just to discuss the concept of threat and suspicious behavior. You'll kind of have to excuse my harsh voice. Allergies have been getting to me the last couple of days here in Michigan. Uh, what I want to do is give you just a real basic, brief introduction to how to identify threat, what constitutes threat, and how to view suspicious behavior and some of the impacts that are associated with that. So we won't take very long to do this, but I wanted to give you some indication and some education, if I can, at least get people started so that not only can they protect themselves, but they will feel comfortable in coming forth and reporting things that they see that are abnormal and can help law enforcement. So let's kind of jump into it right away. I want to discuss threat. When you think of threat, most people think of threat as that. Well, they think of people, and that is one category of threat. Uh, Another category is items or objects. That would be like a backpack or a satchel or something like that. Uh, and then the third category of threats that I want to cover will be situations and events. And those are things like the marathon, the Boston Marathon, as an example. Okay, when we think of people and threats, there are those that are very obvious. Someone has a gun that's pointed at you. That's obviously a threat. It's pretty easily discerned. What is less discerning might be behaviors. Now, if somebody is holding a gun or running at you with a knife or a baseball bat, those are actual behaviors that you're looking at, and they discern a definite threat, in this case, an imminent threat. When we talk about identifying and protecting ourselves, which means we don't want to wait till we get to that self-defense point we were just mentioning. We want to begin to identify things about people that could cause us to believe we have to remove ourselves from the threat or prevent something from happening in the future. And let me give you a real example. Sometimes you have to understand that when you're dealing with suspicious behavior and threat, um, your culture, your value, your core value systems come into play here, and so you view threat from how you've been raised and how you see things in the world, and sometimes that can get in the way of identifying uh, uh, a real threat and may give us a false threat. Um, and let me give you an example of that. If you happen to be coming from a certain particular culture or background and you walk into a mall and you see somebody with a lot of tattoos all over their arms and their neck and their legs, their face happens to be pierced with jewelry. Some people look at that and consider that a representation of gangster, or what they call gangsta and the hoods, or some sort of evil, non-normal appearance that would constitute you becoming alert and uncertain about this person. Um, and certainly, we have some background for this in movies and TV dramas and etc. Portray people that way in a lot of cases, but the fact is, it's not an observable behavior trait that you would look at and say, hey, yeah, this person is a threat to us. And as you wouldn't necessarily want to look at someone who's Mideastern, Chinese, Japanese, black. Uh, you wouldn't want to take skin color and begin to say this automatically denotes a threat to me. It's something that I want to be extremely cautious about here, because there is no observable behavior relative to a threat that would link itself to a potential crime or potential act of violence. So when we talk about people in threat, we want to make sure that we don't begin to develop false signals about the reality of a threat. And we don't see tattoos and or skin color necessarily as the indicator of a suspicious person, and then automatically draw a conclusion to a threat. So that's something you have to keep in mind. In my book, Creating a Bad Guy Free Zone, I cover this quite a bit. I cover the cultural aspects of how you will look at threat, and I also cover this idea of what a threat really constitutes and suspicious behavior. So you can get a lot more about this, and there'll be some information in the description and at the end of the video to tell you how to find that book and buy it if you want to. But but the point here is not necessarily to sell the book. The point here is to try to give you information. Some of that information comes from research where I came from, like the Homeland Security, FBI. All these people have various videos and courses. I just happen to do a lot of research on all those and try to consolidate it into something that's not law enforcement based, but really designed for the average person. People constitute a threat. Another threat is items or objects, and those are things like backpacks or duffel bags or sports bags, bottles filled with liquid. This is, you hear about, the stuff you can and cannot carry. Well, this is where the TSA is looking for objects that seem suspicious, that constitute a threat, like a bottle of liquid could be perceived as nitroglycerin, which would be dangerous to carry, but a similar kind of explosive that could be used on an airplane or so forth. We didn't even think about back, before the Boston Marathon bombing, at least in the United States, backpacks, if you saw a backpack, you didn't think about anything. Now there is that, even though you may not think about it overtly, there is that little thing in your gut that tells you, well, is that or is that not suspicious? How do I define that? It's how that's used. For example, the idea that the Boston Marathon bombers had a backpack was not necessarily something you'd want to look at as suspicious. However, when they take it off and leave it against the doors or side along the way where the runners are running and then walk away from those backpacks, then that is not normal behavior. And so that behavior, combined with that object that they use, that item, the backpack, that should send you a signal that you need to say something or do something at that point. So items can be anything. They can, like I said, somebody could put a flammable liquid, explosive container like a coffee mug or something, and try to hide it behind a trash container in a mall against the wall. So if you saw a coffee cup stuck behind on the floor, stuck behind a trash can, that's makes that item sort of suspicious and possibly a threat until it's validated not to be a threat. Whereas if you saw it inside the container, you may not think anything, but obviously, people can drop it in the container also, but you wouldn't see it in there. So you can only address things that you can see and that you can observe. But if you did see it behind there, that is something I would tell you. If it were me, I would probably go into security and say, "There's a coffee cup behind there, coffee canister behind that trash can right there," and I'm a little concerned about it. I don't know why it would be there. I mean, most people put it in. And if it's a hard container, then most people wouldn't be dropping it in the container. They certainly wouldn't try to hide it behind the trash can. So you can see my point there. So items and objects, strange items, if somebody leaves a bag somewhere, like in an airport, we pretty much all know if you see a bag, I mean, you're told this in the airport, it's posted everywhere. If you see a bag and there's nobody with a bag in an airport, then you need to let somebody know. So it's similar to things. If something seems out of place, it's just not quite right. There's a suitcase on a street corner near a busy street corner at 5 o'clock in the afternoon where everybody, the crowd is like New York City, and it's just sitting there. Nobody's around it or doing anything. That's probably something you want to say something about. The third threat category that people need to be familiar with are situations and events. They offer that they're a threat because terrorists, for example, love to make a large impact. So places that have a lot of people in them or are frequented by a lot of people in an area, these are target areas that people can have. They congregate. They're less likely. They're not paying attention to what's going on around them, and they're just having fun, or they're focused on something like a movie. So places like nightclubs, like the Pulse nightclub, concerts. Paris Hall concert is an example, but that could be any concert in this country. So large sporting events, arena programs, football games, baseball games, all these kinds of events constitute an opportunity for potential threat. But some other potential threats that are more in the news recently and available are protest march, where you have large crowds of people, and not only that, but there's agitation amongst those people. So the Dallas Black Lives Matter march, where there was a lot of gunfire and police officers were shot and killed. There was I think somewhere up north in Minnesota or Wisconsin, somewhere in that area, there was Black Lives Matter march, and there was a big argument, and a guy shot 5 people during that. So you have to realize when you go to something like a protest march, particularly one that has a lot of emotion tied to it, that's a potential threat. So you would have to know a lot about how to view suspicious behavior. We're pretty certain that people who attend these, who have black outfits on, cover their face with a black bandana mask, and cover their head with black. In other words, they don't want to be seen. They don't want to be identified. They want to be identified through video. These people are most likely not coming there to peacefully listen to something they don't agree with. So that's an example of a situation or event. So you have 3 areas of threats. You have to watch out for people. You have to watch out for items and objects, and you have to watch out for events and various kinds of social programs, etc. That you may be around. Marathons are like the Boston Marathon. These are all potential times where either they represent targets for people like terrorists or criminals, or they represent uh, opportunities for violence because of the emotion attached to the event. Um, Malls, I mean, there's probably no place that you can name that we haven't had a mass shooting or a bombing event happening. There's theaters and restaurants and nightclubs and concerts and uh, 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 I don't know. I mentioned theaters. So there's just malls, schools, work. So I want you to think of protecting your when you think of protecting yourself. I want you to think in holistic terms, not just your home. All that integrates with you in your life at points and times, or should be concerning enough for you to identify a protection strategy for that area. And by that I mean you thought through the things that you need to protect for. For example, how many people know what your child's school does for protection? There's an example. What kind of protection program do you have at work? When's the last time you had a drill for a lone shooter at work? Schools do them a little more frequently now. Probably people who work, I'm guessing they're going to tell me they didn't. They haven't had one. They've never had one, or it's been a long time since they have one. And some of them aren't even talking about it because kind of, there's this workplace shooting like San Bernardino, and it goes down in history, and then people forget about it because it never happens to them, and they don't want to think about it. And that's the way we are in America. But let me tell you, it's a different world today. People like Israel, they live with it daily. Okay, and now Europe is beginning to feel it weekly, and it's not going to be long before it hits our shores, because that's the kind of world that's out there. There are people who do not want to see us be successful in our society, and then they like to take advantage of the internal unrest, which is one reason why we need to solve that in this country. So, how does that relate to suspicious behavior? Well, suspicious behavior is often to identify whether it's a threat or not. It first normally becomes suspicious. So, if you have a person that you're looking at, and you wonder whether they're suspicious or not. You want to differentiate away from race or identifying marks like dress or tattoos or things like that. And you want to look for specific behaviors. But for specific behaviors, you have to then know how criminals think and their method of operation. And that's the other thing I cover in my book. And having that knowledge is what allows you then to take what you perceive as abnormal behavior, hold it up against this criteria of operating guidelines that criminals and terrorists use, and actually see, aha, that is abnormal, and I should report it. And it might be something like a neighbor noticing that their neighbor is buying ammonia nitrate. Goodness, hundreds of tons of it. Hundreds of thousands of pounds of it, storing it in the garage. Now, you see that happening. You know they're not in the lawn business, and you know they're not. Their house doesn't have that big a yard, and probably would have enough supply for 75 years. That you have to ask what is going on there. What's happening. So if there are other signals, like when you talk to the person is irate about the government, irate about what's going on in the world, irate about a race, whatever that might be, and they keep talking about buying these new guns on websites, and finding camo gear and laser sights and stuff like that. That combined with the thousands of pounds of ammonium nitrate might be telling you you might want to say something about this person to somebody. Let law enforcement or somebody come in and investigate. At least take a look at the person's background. When this happens, the reason why this works is if you know what to look for in these realms. Law enforcement does. but the average citizen doesn't. And that's why when they say, if you see something, say something, most people don't know what to look for to see. So uh, this is what I'm trying to help you understand. So if you see that and you report it, what you're going to find is they're going to go through histories and backgrounds. So, they have ways of pulling up and looking at their social media accounts. They have ways of checking their phone records. They have a lot of ways to look at this person before they even confront them to see if there's some ties somewhere, some other indicators that begin to put all these little dots together that indicate, yeah, this person wants to lay out a bomb. So and attack something. These are things, and you don't know. They may already have this person on their radar, and you're just confirming something for them. So. By understanding criminal behavior, how they operate, what to look for, and then combining that with being able to observe physical things that you see operate within those guidelines that they use, gives you a pretty good comfort level of, now I know what I see and I don't mind reporting it. And frankly, there's two things that have been at odds with us reporting things. And I said this in a previous small video I put on Twitter. One is education. People don't know what to look for. And the third one is the law. And that is they're afraid to say anything because of hate crime talk or you be just being sued in general. Litigious. This is a litigious society, so people don't want to be sued. They don't want to be, ruffled. Make ripples in the water, ruffle the feathers, however you want to say that. Um, but the fact is, if you don't do that, it may cost people lives. Worst case, I mean, the best case scenario is nothing's there. It's just fine, and then you can still rest peaceful about that. Hopefully your neighbor won't be mad at you if they find out. But chances are most law enforcement are very discreet about how they do that because they want you coming to them. So keep these things in mind. Suspicious behavior, you need to think like this. If something truly is suspicious, once you learn how to identify that, and I encourage you to read and research further. If you don't want to read my book, then go to the Homeland Security site, the FBI website, Homeland's website, find some information on there that talks about this. And that's fine. You can do that. What I've tried to do is gather all that, condense it down into quick, easy, meaningful information for you to use, uh, and learn about it so that you feel comfortable in identifying exactly what you need to know to feel comfortable to identify and set up protection strategies that protects you and your loved ones, but also help law enforcement out there, because 380 million of us in this country, and if half of us even applied what I'm talking about here, we put a lot of people on the streets, and that's a big barrier for terrorists and criminals to overcome, whether they're homegrown or whether they're coming in from the outside or whether they're U.S. citizens being radicalized through the internet. And you have to recognize that things like cyber and the internet are also um, these are also events or situations that can be considered threats. I mean, for example, there was a potential school mass shooting thwarted by the parents who went in and found this information on social media that was being shared, and then purchases through the internet of weapons. And the parents found this out on their child and reported it to the law enforcement. Consequently, nothing happened. And the child, if nothing else, the child might get some help, in correcting this and not be burdened with this, but certainly no one was hurt or killed. So I just want to encourage you to educate yourself a little bit. I get it. We don't want to talk about it. We don't even want to hear about it. It's never happened to us. It's never going to happen to us. I'm sure everybody that went to the Pulse nightclub didn't think anything would ever happen to them. Okay, nor did the San Bernardino people, nor did the children who went into Sandy Hook School. Um, but if you really have to have more validation, then find one of these mass shootings or find a couple of them and follow the news reports after the shooting. And what you will find is these reports show, as it's investigated, more information keeps coming out that there was stuff there before this happened, that if people would have recognized it and seen it and reported it, most likely it would not have happened. Okay, just go check that out. I mean, it's out there. That's kind of what I did. A lot of that research premise for the book, but uh, try to get involved because the more of us that are out there, the safer everybody's going to be, and that's a big rationale for me doing writing what I wrote in this book is to protect myself, um, my children, my grandchildren, and others who I care about in this world, and just others in general who don't deserve what happens to them all of a sudden, like Mr. Goodwin, who's just shot dead in the street by some maniac coming home from an Easter Sunday. Who, you know, there's some things you don't know they're going to happen. But I'm guessing as we research that out, we'll find more and more. This guy was literally on Facebook live announcing this stuff up front. If hopefully maybe we could have tracked him in a GPS car if we would have gotten there faster, and this guy would be alive today. But we don't know that. What I'm telling you can't guarantee you won't be attacked. It can't guarantee it'll save lives. But I'll tell you what, having them for this information and trying to apply it correctly and properly, and trying to and doing something about it is definitely far better than burying our heads in the sand and hoping it goes away, because it's not going away, folks. It's getting more and more active in this country. So that's all I have to say to you this evening. In the description will be a location where you can purchase the book if you want. In fact, there's a couple of books out there. One's on travel, so if you travel at all, you might want to take a look at that one. It's kind of a checklist format, like a flight checklist before you take off. This one is to help you try to make sure you cover the things you need to cover before you travel to keep you secure while you're on the road. And then, of course, my other book is a primary book on general protection, personal protection. They're both called Creating a Bad Guy Free Zone. The one on travel is Creating a Bad Guy Free Zone While You Travel. They're in Amazon, and I'll post the links where you can get to them. But even if you don't buy those books, at least retweet them or put them on social media for somebody who might want them, because I want to touch absolutely as many people as I can to help them understand just the basics, just the real basic, not what law enforcement knows, but just the basics of what can help them be beneficial to law enforcement out there. Okay. As always, my prayer is for your protection and your security. And I am Victor Vogel, creating Bad Guy Free Zones.